we learn from our students all the time. I'm still stealing little tricks from my students when they come up with something in a fight show, and I think, oh, that's a good little bit. I'll I'll grab that one. I've been stealing for years, and I told Bill Hobbs one time that I said, I think I've stolen a lot from you, and he said, it's not from me actually. He said, I don't believe there's a move out there that hasn't been done somewhere in our lifetime or in the lifetimes of others. But because we see it for the first time, we think it's original. But he said, I don't think there is an original move. He might be right.
I have an odd question because of something you just said really made me think about it. There have been times in the past where there seemed to be deserts for theater and places when there's been oasis for theater. Like this isn't, as extreme as it is, this isn't the first time theaters have been under pressure or had to close. And you've seen probably a number of theaters that you cherished run out of time, right? And I was just wondering about past times and how you managed them, where you found theater under threat. What do you want to say about that?
Well, there's always a time for development. And I think this is a kind of almost a perfect time for development, because what you can do is now we actually have time to work on those projects that we've been mulling about for, however long, and actually start. And you can still work online with people. You can still connect this way. You can connect over the phone. You can actually connect I remember your studio. I love that studio. If you're in that studio with 2 or 3 other people, when you're sword distance apart, you're apart. And if you want to be safe, you wear a mask. It helps. And you wash your hands. You do all those things. And then you work together. But you can work together, and you can work together in a small group and discover things or practice things, try them out. And you can also check, if you have ideas for writing things, you can add those in. There's all that. It opens up, it closes our practical side for a while, but it opens up the workspace or the workshop time that we have. So in my personal life, I'm finally doing things that I've been putting on hold for the last 15, 20 years, waiting to get time to do it. Now I have lots of time, and I know I'm never going to finish.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to remember who said, always pick, I think they use the word hobby, but always pick a hobby you can never complete, because it gives you life.
I've certainly got them.
Yeah. Well, what are you doing right now? I know that you were really interested in and you've always been interested in making weapons and working on grips and pommels. What are you working on now?
Well, I'm still doing that, but I've added a bit of leather work.
Ah, nice.
So I'm doing Elizabethan hangers, and I've done a handful of small sword things off the Angelo prints. So frogs, not scabbards. Scabbards, I'm still looking for somebody to sew. You need to get a tube and sew the tube, and then you need a form to push down the tube, wet it, and push it down to shape it. And then you don't have to have, but it would be nice to have metal tips, like a proper chape on the bottom tip, and a metal throat on the top. And those things are hard to come by. So you have to find people who will do that for you, or who can do that. And that I'm not set up for, but I'd like to.
Sure.
So that's part of my plan, but I'm still continuing. I do lots of dagger stuff. I can make my own dagger sheaths and scabbards. And often what I do is I do them with a mix of woods and masonite and that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and then wrap it with leather, or I just take wood and wet the leather and form it around it, dye it. It's a lot of work.
Oh,
You
yes.
think, oh, this will take me 20 minutes. I'll whip this off, and 3 days later, you're still working on it.
But I should say, so if anyone's watching this and thinks, why, I totally sew leather and I'm interested in putting
Oh,
a
yeah,
form down, I
absolutely.
know that JP Fournier would want to speak to you. And if you can't find him yourself, I will put you in touch with him because he would love to work with you in making some of these
Yeah,
scabbards.
that's for sure. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. Because there's an old, if you remember what the old scabbards looked like, they called it burying a seam. So what they would do is they would cut the edges on a diagonal, and then when they pulled them together, they would sew them like this, and then they would flatten them out, and the seam looks like it's smooth with the leather, so you don't have that bump up.
Right.
And
I thought they turned it inside out to do that, like gloves. Wow.
you can't turn a thick piece of leather like that, that's that thick
Of course.
inside out.
Yeah. No, of
If
course, of
if
course.
if it was a thin piece of cloth, you can. And to do, to cover a hard scabbard, you can do that with a piece of cloth or a piece of really thin, light, flat, very pliable leather. You can flip them inside out and then invert it and shove it over a hard tube.
Hmm.
But so you can make your scabbard out of wood or whatever, and cover it with leather. It looks good. But if you go on stage with a hard scabbard and somebody lands on it, or you get it between your legs, you can snap them. And then you have a leather piece with a broken piece inside. And as soon as you pull the sword out, it hangs like that. So
Let's Let me ask you a question about weapons because I have lots and lots and lots of steel, and through Todd and some others who leave weapons at the wit, there's a lot of aluminum as well. Talk to me about what you like using.
I mostly end up using epee blades because they're light and easy to work with.
Mm.
For the heavier, if I could afford it and I had access to it, um, I love aluminum. I like steel, but the steel I have, for example, I have some of the old France Lame broadsword blades, and they weigh a ton.
Well,
So,
you can hammer a nail in with them, though. They'll never break, right?
well,
I've noticed. Well, I've noticed. So as I get weapons that are lighter and perhaps this is such a judgmental word, better. But as I get these new weapons, I can't throw away the old ones. So I have these. You know what I mean? The weapons start to fill up old
oh, I
categories,
know.
and I have some long swords that are kind of they're good for building muscle, but they're not so good for fighting with anymore.
No, and we're more accustomed to um, the flexibility or the flexibility, the scope of movement that we can do with a softer or a lighter blade.
Right.
And if you're going to practice for 6 hours during a day, it's easier to do it with aluminum than it is to do with a heavy piece of steel. Although if you do it with a piece of steel for a while, it's like working with the medicine ball in basketball, where
Yeah.
you have those big heavy balls and you practice, and then when you take the real basketball, it feels like a ping pong ball.
Hmm.
So it has that kind of flip to it. I think there's an advantage to having them, to using them for practice.
Right. Well, I read that the Romans worked with much heavier swords and shields in practice so that when they were in battle, it was easier, right? They had lighter. And there's something to be said about the opposite side, the lighter weapons. There's an expectation from audience of speed, right? They want
Yeah,
to see fights as fast as they see in film. So I think there's something to be said where people want lighter weapons for that alone, right?
yeah. If you know the ballet Romeo and Juliet and the music from Prokofiev, he wrote it when he watched the old movies when they cranked the film, and they were flying at 100 miles an hour. So the music, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the blades, he imagined that would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you get with the ballet for the first time in 1981, we redid all the fights in Romeo and Juliet from that ballet by a Dutch director. Came in and he choreographed the ballet. And then they used to just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it went down once or twice, and the rest of the time just stayed at the same level. And then they moved around the stage. That's it.
Right.
We changed it, everything, to real sword fighting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
foils? Like, what did you use to get the speed?
We used épées.
Ah, so you did use épées.
Épée-bladed rapiers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we had cup hilts. And we had a guy in Winnipeg who used to make chalices for Roman Catholic priests. And he had a form. So he had several forms for those. And so he made all our cups. Nice. And he rolled the edges with brass. And then he fixed the bottom. So they lasted. They still have them.
Oh, and amazing.
They were really, really solid. Light and easy to work with, and he also turned the pommels. Back then, what do you call it? All the brass was a lot cheaper, like about a third the price it is today. So now what used to cost us $15 or $20 costs us $45 to $55. So there's a price difference,
Yeah,
so that accessibility has gone by the wayside a bit.
And I've also noticed what I used to buy. I would buy swords for parts. Like I would take really good blades and use the brass hilts. I know you were a master of that, actually, of finding homes for Franken swords. But I've noticed more and more it's that pewter material that just won't withstand. It's not brass. You know what I mean? And you can't use it, right?
No. So I use steel almost entirely for the hilts.
Mm.
I use some brass sometimes, but usually it's reinforced or it's quite strong without being too heavy.
Right.
I don't use it that often anymore. But just recently I did a small sword and I found in an antique place a fireman's belt buckle that was the right shape.
Neat.
And it had some patterning on it. And it was Larissa Janczek's blade. So it was her blade and a pommel. And then I made a grip for it. And she supplied the crossguard and the quillins with the blade. And then I found this little antique, and it was a beauty. So, and it was light.
I've done that with candlestick holders.
Oh yeah,
like you know what I mean? Because some of them are really interesting little shapes, and
they make great stilettos.
Yeah,
I do stilettos with candlesticks because you can get a candlestick holder for $1 over at the Goodwill places, And so what you do is you cut the top and the bottom off. And the middle becomes your handle, your grip, and then you find a pommel. And for pommels, for those things, we sometimes use brass or go to Lee Valley Tools and get brass pommels and do it that way. Or we put steel on the top and steel on the bottom, that kind of thing. Right. So we mix it up.
And just so people know, Lee Valley's great, and they're all about mailing stuff to you, and they're fantastic. I think you're talking about, when you say pommels, they're drawer pulls.
They're door pulls, yeah. And we re-drill them to, so anybody's interested. The standard is 1 by 6 millimeters, whatever milliliters, or it's metric, 1 by 6 metric. That's the standard thread that goes on all saber blades, épée blades, and foil blades that are made today. So we use that, and if you want to drill that and then tap it, what you do, so tapping and dyeing is putting the thread on both parts, the sword and the inside of the pommel. You drill it with a 1364 cobalt drill, and you'll get a good. It's not great. Nothing's great on stainless steel.
I was just going to ask because I keep coming across what look like nice looking pommels.
It's really hard to work with stainless.
Yeah.
You can do it, but you need patience. You need higher end equipment. You need the kind of metal equipment that people use when they do metal. When they, here in Alberta they make oil parts for oil machines and all that. So those parts that are turned and cost $20,000 to do a turning, that's the kind of metal or machinery that you need to turn.
You're talking about a machine shop for sure.
Yeah.
Not something you're doing in your basement.
Not at home in the garage.
No. But that being said, I just want to reinforce what you're saying, that it's still possible for you to have a lot of hands-on stuff. And I think there's a joy in discovery of making and using something you created in fighting. Like some of my favorite gear came from my friend Chris Warlow at Fantastic Creations, and or I myself have kind of franken-sorted, and it makes me happy, right? Because you feel you feel like a proud parent.
Oh yeah. Well, I've got a lot of that. I think I have about 400 pieces up in storage here of mixed stuff,
You had these remarkable grips that I think were court swords or swords that you would wear to official events. You know what I mean? Those little tiny hilts. Those were quite neat. And you said you picked them up when you were in the UK.
In London, yeah. There was a little old, what they called it a court sword. It was a small sword, and but they often called them court swords. Henry Marshall, who was one of the Society of British Fight Director guys, detested the use of the word court sword. He thought it was very. Anyway, he was a small sword guy, and he was really good at it. But anyway, they had the small sword, and they used to sell in the antique stores. There was one made, and it's the one I have, the one that you're talking about. And they sold it on the average for about £30. And over the years, the price has risen to about £30. So it stayed the same. So what you find out about swords is you buy them, and they seldom ever go up. Or they don't lose a lot, and they don't gain much. They might go up a couple of dollars, but they cost more to buy new when you get them built than they do to buy the original oftentimes.